Okay, awesome. So again, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Maria, for having us, and to the organizers as well for giving us this space to talk to you all. Today, we're here to discuss the current state of testing in Kubernetes, what is and why we recommend implementing a unified testing approach when working with cloud-native applications, and how to do this with open source software like Testcube. So we'll move on to introducing ourselves. My name is Alejandra. I am a developer advocate at Testcube. I have professional education as an industrial and systems engineer. And in the last 6 years, I've been working as a project, software, and now DevRel engineer. So there's my LinkedIn as well. You can find me if you want to keep the conversation going after this or have any questions. Feel free to send me an invite to connect. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here talking with you. So Abdallah, up to you.
Cool. Thanks. I'm Abdallah. I work as a associate PM at product manager at Testcube. I have done mostly everything related to developer tooling roles. So I've done some software engineering, DevRel, and now I'm super excited about doing a little more product side. I use GitHub as a social media, so I like your projects and I see what stuff you're liking. So follow me there if you want to see more. But yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So let's get right into it. So to preface, I would like to talk a little bit about the current state of testing in the cloud native and Kubernetes ecosystems, which, I mean, you may be very well aware of yourselves in your companies or within your teams. So you may all be familiar to a degree, right? No matter our position, be it platform engineers, software engineers, or testers, that the current state of testing in Kubernetes is quite challenging because of its complex nature, right? Kubernetes, it's complicated in its own, and it's made up of many moving parts and elements that are involved in deploying and managing containerized applications. So because of this, testing cloud native applications can be very complicated, and navigating our CI/CD pipelines and workflows that are usually also not designed for testing in Kubernetes make it even more so. So yeah, to summarize, Kubernetes complicates things even more. So this presents a series of challenges that are very unique to testing applications in the cloud. So I would like to talk specifically about some of these unique challenges and what they entail. So for example, to start, CI/CD pipelines can be complicated to begin with, varying from company to company and team to team. But when Kubernetes comes into the mix and we try and implement a testing system, our CI/CD pipelines get even more complex. For example, if you have an application that's deployed in Kubernetes and you want to add a new test, whatever test it can be, an integration end-to-end test, for example, the first thing you'll need to do is figure out how to give your CI/CD pipeline access to your cluster. You might have a lot of things that are related to allowing this to happen, right? You might have internal APIs that are not exposed. You will also have the developer or the tester rely on you and form this dependency where you will have to set this up for them, for it to work, right? So all of that to just add and run one test. Another challenge is that with your applications deployed in Kubernetes, it becomes hard to debug and analyze your test results. So you have all these type of tests that are coexisting, and you need to allocate a place for your test results, which will become very complicated when using different tools. Why? Well, because each tool has their own execution and reporting style, and your developers and testers end up having to navigate through pods for your logs, like looking for a needle in haystack, right? So adding to that, every time you want to run or debug a specific test, you find yourself having to build and execute the entire thing all over again. Closely related to this challenge, is also that it's way too complex to store and visualize test artifacts. Test artifacts are I mean the files that your testing frameworks produce. So for example, you may have some testing tools like Cypress or Playwright, which are used for end-to-end tests that generate video recordings of a spun up browser, or maybe JSON files that will need a place to live and that are crucial to the testing process and for debugging purposes. So whenever you add a new testing tool to your stack, you'll also have to go through setting up your CI tool so that it uploads this file into a storage bucket, for example. The next one. Yeah. Of course, there's also the challenge of having to navigate through restricted access to testing environments and the dependency that comes with having your testers, like I mentioned before, rely on the DevOps or platform engineers to set up these testing environments. The first example I talked about, where you might have, for example, an internal API that you have to expose, that itself makes you vulnerable, right, to security attacks. So to summarize, when testing our applications that are deployed in Kubernetes, we stumble across very unique pain points. To start, well, complexity of our CI/CD pipelines, that it just gets even more complicated. You have security and restricted access concerns. You have this lack of centralized results and cohesion between the tools we're using. You may be using tools to tackle different types of tests, but it's hard to bring them together. And there's also this difficulty to adapt and to navigate. For those that aren't familiar with Kubernetes at all, testers should be able to focus solely on testing without forming this dependency and bottlenecks with DevOps and platform engineers. So to address these challenges and pain points separately, there are plenty of testing frameworks and tools out there that cover security testing, that cover unit testing, end-to-end integration, load testing, that will help us test our applications as a whole. But when it comes to bringing them together, especially in a cloud native environment, that's the real challenge, okay? So that's why we're here to talk to you about taking on a unified testing approach. And what do I mean by this? I mean, bringing together all the aforementioned testing practices, all the tools and all the processes to ensure that all the aspects of our applications are tested thoroughly and efficiently, and that our teams have a way to go through our tests and results, okay? So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like, okay? So what do we need to build a unified testing system? Well, some of the elements that make up a unified testing approach can be the use of automated, continuous, and asynchronous testing, being able to combine different tools to test every aspect of your applications, displaying the results for all of these types of tests in a centralized manner, not having to look for them separately, and implementing DevOps practices. So by implementing a unified testing approach, we tackle several of the challenges we discussed earlier. And you can also, of course, reap some of benefits such as consistency in your results, efficiency for your teams and testing efforts, overall quality of your software, better streamlined collaboration across teams and between the tools that you're using, and the ability to adapt easily to different tools and workflows. So, you also get this adaptability that I mentioned to Kubernetes as a whole. So you won't have to be training your entire team on how to use Kubernetes when their job is just to be a QA tester, right? So by separating all these elements into a single one, you're also giving back that independence to testers and developers to focus solely on their testing efforts. So we covered what it means to implement a unified testing approach and all the benefits that come with it. And I know that it sounds perfect and a little maybe imaginative in theory, but we want to talk about how we can actually put this into practice and how we can build a testing system that follows this approach, or more so how to translate our current workflow into one, okay? So yeah, so we'll start by covering some of the principles and practices that we recommend and that we follow at Testcube to implement a unified testing approach. first things first, you have to design for testability. You have to design for testability in a way that lets you combine tools so you can test the entirety of your applications. You also have to prioritize the use of automated and asynchronous testing, being able to test on the go, as well as periodically, continuously, and under certain conditions or based on certain events, right? You shouldn't have to run your entire application just to do this. Finally, the use of centralized metrics is, a sure way to, alleviate multiple headaches and measure your testing effectiveness easily. But like I said before, this may sound easier said than done. So now I'll pass it on to Abdallah, who'll go into detail on how exactly we achieve this with Testcube.
Cool. Yeah. So we actually built Testcube with these things in mind. And Testcube is basically an open source system that helps you run the tests inside Kubernetes instead of like in your CI/CD pipeline. And Ale has mentioned things like whenever you create a test in the CI/CD pipeline, you'll need to give access for the CI pipeline to your Kubernetes cluster, so you can test your application. And by running the tests inside the cluster directly, for example, you have that problem solved. No exposing applications. You can run them in a totally, for example, restricted environment or network in the cluster. So one of the things that we built Testcube for is once you run your tests inside of the Kubernetes cluster, you get the advantage of, first of all, integrating with whatever testing tools that you want. You can run with Testcube, Cypress, Postman, K6, basically the tool that you need. But ideally, what we want to do is basically make the process of adding those tests easy for your QA team or developers so they can start testing instantly. You want to take leverage of Kubernetes. So Kubernetes, have figured out how to scale up and down some of these stuff. For example, load testing tools, you need to execute them, a million requests or something. Being able to take advantage of Kubernetes allows you to be able to do these things seamlessly if you're running your tests inside of Kubernetes directly. There is one interesting aspect that I pretty like a lot. All our applications are Kubernetes manifests, and we use Kubernetes manifests to apply everything into the cluster, deployment services, pods, whatever. But whenever we're talking about tests, it becomes a little difficult to know how to manage those tests. Usually you store them in GitHub, but it's already following a different process than the way that you're using for your applications. So one of the things that Testcube does is basically having the tests be a CRD or a Kubernetes resource, and using that to manage the tests in the cluster. And finally, and we'll jump into a demo now, is you want to enable your testing team to run the test without depending on you or the DevOps practitioner in the company. The testing team or developer team need to be able to create some very easy, test quickly, iterate on them, fix them, whatever. And hopefully that's what we want to achieve. So I'm gonna do a quick demo of Testcube so you can see what it looks like. Again, this is open source, and once you install Testcube in your cluster, with the Testcube controller, you actually get also a dashboard to manage that controller. You could do that through the CLI. You can manage the Testcube through a CLI or the dashboard, or even the CRDs as we just mentioned. But I think this dashboard is pretty cool because actually, once you have a bunch of tests run by your entire company, you can start seeing having an overview of the stuff that are going on. So just to make things easier, I'm going to create a test here and show you what the flow looks like for your testers. So once you're creating a test, let's say this is my first test ever, because I'm sure that someone already took the first test. What we do is actually pre-package many of the testing tools, so you don't even need to get the Docker image. But basically, if you want to get the Docker image, or if you have your own testing tool that we don't support yet, you can bring it. But you can see here that Cypress is supported, Gradle, again. And so we actually, are tool agnostic. In this case, for this example, I'm just going to use K6, which is a pretty neat load testing tool. And then where is that test living? The content of that test could be in a Git repository, or it could even be a file on your computer. So for example, if you're a QA tester and you want to try things out before even committing them, you can just come in here and start adding them. I'm going to add a random tests that fails 50% of the time. You can see here the the 0.05, so it's not a bug, it's a feature. And once you create the test, we'll actually just run it a couple of times, just so you can see the runs here. These logs are actually now what Testcube is doing under the hood is actually, first of all, spinning up Kubernetes jobs to run the test for you. And whenever the testing tool is actually generating some logs, we're saving these logs inside your Kubernetes cluster. So we ship Testcube with a object storage, min.io, so you can save the logs of the test runs that you're doing. But the interesting part, again, is that if you go to settings and definition, you'll be able to see that these tests are now created as a Kubernetes resource. And this is pretty powerful because now you can annotate the Kubernetes resource of the test as much as you want. You can, for example, say, hey, I want this test to be run at a specific node far away from my application code, or even just use tools like Argo CD or Flux to manage things in a GitOps fashion. Again, once you run the test, some of the logs you need to save them. But there are other tools actually like Cypress or Playwright that Ali has mentioned. So let me see if I can actually search for them. My keyboard decided to die now. So for example, you have here your Cypress tool. Some of them, they generate a recording of what happened, like the UI recording. And so you also want to find a way to save those artifacts, like those videos that you're generating. And so by saving the logs and the artifacts inside the cluster, like your QA tester or you yourself will be able to just go there and be able to see what happened with the test, why it failed, and what was going on when you were running it. Then one of the things that happen or you take advantage of once you're running your tests inside the cluster is that you're able to react to cluster events. So for example, you could say if a deployment named Testcube was modified, for example, then run me a specific test. So not only you can run the test from a CI perspective or just when you're committing code or merging the code, you want to run tests in different ways. You want to run them once a deployment has been updated. You want to run them on a schedule. So for example, once you go into a specific test and to the scheduling place, because it's a Kubernetes job, you can just schedule however you want that job to be run, or every 30 minutes just spin up 30 Cypress tests and run them against my testing. So this is like a little demo that we wanted to do. Again, Testcube is fully open source. Once you install, you'll get this dashboard. Even the dashboard is open source. And hopefully what I wanted to achieve with this demo is show you how easy it is for your QA team or your testers or developers to create a test easily. And once they're comfortable with what they created and they've iterated on it, they can then send it to the operations team or the platform engineering team for them to merge it into the code. So I'm going to go back here to the slides. Again, we've talked about this. When do you want to run your test? There are some tests that you want to run them on a schedule. For example, the load testing tools, you want, for example, to run them at 3 a.m. in the morning so you don't break up your traffic. You can run it directly through the Testcube CLI or the open source dashboard that we just showed. You want to run them maybe on an API. So for example, some people, what we've seen is that they add they add the Testcube API into their CI because they still want to run tests in the CI. So that's still even possible. Again, what I showed is being able to run them when an annotated object in Kubernetes changes, or to cluster events that we've seen. And yeah, I've shifted around the order of stuff. So this is not the demo now. It's time to wrap up. Thank you. We're here to answer any of the questions. Put your QA tests in the Q&A section, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. So yeah, back to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, guys. Amazing presentation. And I see we already have one question. How often are the containers updated and security scanned?
So we offer the images that you've seen in the dashboard. We officially support them, so we try to update them as much as possible. But then you can actually bring your own containers. So if we're not going at the pace that you want to go, you can just bring it yourself. Eventually, Testcube just wants to orchestrate the way you're running tests. The container part is just a convenience part. That's why we support them. But you know, and we also update them to the latest security or updates that they generate. But the main idea is that you bring whatever you want and you run it. And Testcube will help you with the other aspects like saving the logs, having a dashboard for your SRE team to be able to look at it and so on. Did I answer that correctly, Ale? Would you want to add something? Cool.
Yeah, guys, I see that you're sharing your LinkedIn URLs in the chat, which is super cool. But I would also recommend joining Platform Engineering Slack, because that's where the whole jazz and jam is, and you'll be able to find many of practitioners, platform engineers, are there already. And back to question, can you share a Slack link? I already shared the platformengineering.org. It's you can just like join Slack, or give me 1 second and I'll send the direct link to the Slack channel. But next question, does Testcube integrate with Jenkins?
Testcube can integrate with whatever CI/CD platform you want. Eventually, we ship the Testcube CLI, so you can. I'll just show you an example of what that looks like. We ship the Testcube CLI so you can run it from wherever you want. It could be Jenkins or GitHub Actions. Wait, what happened? Why did our site crash? No, it didn't. So the idea is that instead of like running your test the way that we're doing here, like a test after a test after a test, what you want to do is just add all the tests into your cluster with Testcube, and then using Jenkins or GitHub Actions or GitLab, you could use the Testcube CLI or the API to trigger the test. So to answer your question, yes.
Cool. Next question, can you run deploy on the next environment after a successful run? Imagine, for example, on a given scenario that I have 100% of success and this triggers somehow SCD, such as cloud deploy or Argo CD.
I didn't get that question right. Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah. Can you run deploy on the next environment after a successful run? That's the question. Imagine, for example, on a given scenario that I have 100% of success. This triggers somehow SCD, such as cloud deploy or Argo CD.
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. One of the, as I showed before, one of the interesting parts is that Testcube create the tests as a CRD. So first of all, you can replicate these tests in your staging and production environment. You can just take the Kubernetes resource, apply it to staging, and if everything works fine, then just take it to production. Using Argo CD, Flux, wherever you want. And then if you want to trigger the deployment in the next environment, as I showed before, you can actually add a trigger, like a Testcube trigger. So whenever a specific application has been deployed, you can, like reacting to a cluster event, you can trigger the deployment, or again, just doing it from the CLI in your CI process.
Cool. Can you request resource limits to the tests on Kubernetes?
That's a very good question. We've been working on that or trying to define how to solve that at the moment. We haven't at the end, but as I showed before, the test, let me just go quickly through it. The tests are CRDs that you're creating, and you can annotate these tests, these CRDs as much as you want. Because we're creating a job under the hood, you can define the job template to have a specific limit. But at the moment, what we want to achieve in the future is obviously automatically detecting how many tests are being run, and then limiting the new tests from being run if the resources are complete. But yeah, to answer your question, you can annotate the CRD to have the limits that you need.
Cool. Can we use it with OpenShift and Java regression framework?
So for OpenShift, definitely you can find the information in our documentation. For the Java regression framework, again, I think we support Gradle and Maven as well. And if we're not supporting a specific sort of test, there's a section in our documentation. It's called container executors. So let me just go quickly through it. You'll be able to see it. And these instructions here help you actually bring your own test. So if there's a tool that we're not supporting and it's critical to your team, you can always just bring the image. Eventually, it's as easy as defining a CRD that contains the Docker image of your test, and Testcube will be able to support it for you.
Cool. And 2 questions from Samir. Can we use Testcube via TL? Yeah, that's from our previous webinar. I remember one.
Yeah.
That's a cool extension. Well, probably answer this one and then another one. What's the difference between Testcube and Open Policy Agent?
Ale, do you call it kubectl, kubectl, kubecontrol? What do you call it?
Kubectl.
I call it kubectl for some reason. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can kubectl. No, it's kubectl and chill. Yes, you can run it via kubectl. I don't see the other answer. The other question, sorry.
The question was, what is the difference between Testcube and OPA? I don't think at the moment I'm very knowledgeable about OPA at the moment to be able to answer this question. But please join us in the Discord channel that you see here, and you can post the question. I'll hopefully give you an answer once I know a little bit more. As I understand, OPA is just like a language that enables you to create some sort of rules, and potentially, if we see it as that, you could think as Testcube of Testcube as a the tool that allows you to execute and orchestrate the tests, and then you could use it in conjunction with OPA to run some validation, have some tests been answered or not. But again, I'm not really sure this answer is actually good. So hopefully we can answer to you in the Discord channel.
Cool. Yes, join in the channel. And I already shared the link to the Slack directly and to the platform engineering.com. But another question, guys, can you trigger other actions upon success failure of a test run? For example, to run another suite test, send Slack notification, etc.
Ale?
Yeah, you can set up. Yeah, you can set up webhooks, and also we have a Slack integration which you can actually set up. We have it very well documented in our documentation, but at the same time, you can also trigger tests based on or test suites and run them serially or sequentially. So yeah, you definitely can.
Cool. And the last one, is there any artificial intelligence smartness embedded in the Testcube?
Not yet. No, not yet. But hopefully.
No, but we're open source. So if you have any ideas, you can implement something or create a feature request. We're always open for that.
Absolutely, especially nowadays, how easy is it to create like an AI feature? It's just like a text, and that's about it. So yeah, for sure.
Do you guys use ChatGPT for coding now? I think the next question.
For what?
For just, I don't know, for creating some sort of line of code or overall structure, because I use it a lot.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially testers. I've seen a lot of people. What they do is actually they generate the test data using ChatGPT, because it's pretty good for these like sort of boring task of like, hey, let me generate a bunch of fake users or something like that. So for sure, even in the context of testing, we do use it quite a lot.
Cool. We have one more question. Does Testcube handles flaky tests? For example, a given scenario that might break once, does it try again?
I would need to ask the team about that. I don't see how that's possible at the moment. But one of the interesting aspects of having your test independent from the CI is that if a test fails in the CI and you want to rerun it again, you'll have to retrigger the entire CI pipeline, the build and all the integration tests and whatever, to even just test stuff one more time. And once you're running it, in Testcube and inside the cluster, rerunning a test is just like clicking on the play button. And so if it's not retriggering the test automatically on failure, what you could do is just fix it instantly and quickly as well. But again, the Discord channel should answer this question better than I have.
Oh, I didn't see any other questions. Again, thank you so much for staying so late with us, Alex, and to you, Abdullah, super amazing presentation. Yeah, we'll see you next week, guys, for another platform engineering webinar. It's going to be the story from MasterCard. So if you have not registered for that one, you can register now, or we'll send over the follow-up email and it will contain the link. We'll share the slides with you tomorrow, as well as the webinar replay, so stay tuned for the webinar follow-up. But other than that, I hope everyone has an amazing day and or night. I'll just go to bed and see you tomorrow. Not tomorrow.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye. Ciao.